Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. The Afghan Grand Assembly, known as the Loya Jirga, has approved the release of remaining 400 Taliban prisoners under the Doha peace deal. A resolution passed by the Jirga said the step has been taken to remove obstacles to start intra-Afghan talks. Addressing the Jirga, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani said he will sign the release order today. Pakistan has welcomed the Council's decision, paving the way for peace talks. France's President Emmanuel Macron says Lebanon's future is at stake and calls for quick action to help the people of the country. He was addressing an online donors conference 5 days after the massive explosion in Beirut that killed 158 people and injured 5,000. Officials estimate the blast at a port's warehouse caused up to $15 billion in damage, but foreign governments are wary about writing blank checks to a government perceived by its own people to be corrupt. In Sri Lanka, former President Mahinda Rajapaksa has been sworn in as the country's Prime Minister for the 4th time. He took oath before his younger brother, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, after his party won a landslide victory in the parliamentary elections last Wednesday. The party led by the Rajapaksa brothers won 145 seats in the 225-member parliament. The US has set a record for coronavirus cases with more than 5 million people now infected. In Iran, there were 163 more fatalities, taking the nationwide death toll past 18,400. India has registered the highest single-day surge in cases with over 65,000 new infections. The country's coronavirus caseload has jumped to over 2.1 million with more than 43,000 deaths. In Pakistan, 8 more people have lost their lives as the infection rate continues to decline, with 634 contracting the virus overnight. Globally, the COVID-19 has claimed over 727,000 lives while infecting more than 19.6 million people. Those are the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now with the news in detail. The Afghan Grand Assembly, known as the Loya Jirga, has approved the release of remaining 400 Taliban prisoners under the Doha peace deal. A resolution passed by the Jirga says the step has been taken to remove an obstacle in the start of the peace process and to end the bloodshed. It called on the Taliban to fulfill their part of the deal to free all government prisoners immediately. The Jirga said intra-Afghan negotiations must be initiated without any excuse after the release of the prisoners. It asked for assurance that the released Taliban will not return to the front lines and that their activities are monitored. The Assembly called on the international community, especially the US, to live up to its commitments to the people of Afghanistan. President Ashraf Ghani convened the Jirga in Kabul on Friday to decide the fate of these prisoners. Pakistan's Foreign Office has welcomed the Council's decision to release the prisoners to pave the way for peace talks. It said the international community must reinforce its support for the success of intra-Afghan negotiations. Earlier, 7 policemen have been killed and 15 others wounded in a car bomb explosion in Afghanistan's city of Ghazni. A spokesperson for the Interior Ministry says the attack targeted a unit of public protection forces. He said the explosion was followed by an attempt to storm the compound in the Kotale Roza area, but all attackers were killed before entering. Police said the wounded have been taken to Kabul by helicopter for treatment and 3 of them are in critical condition. No group has claimed the responsibility for the attack so far. The US has set a record for coronavirus cases with more than 5 million people now infected. Brazil has become the second country after the US to cross 100,000 coronavirus deaths with nearly 3 million infections. Now, globally, the COVID-19 has claimed over 727,000 lives while infecting more than 19.6 million people. More in this report.
The new coronavirus is tumbling records, overwhelming healthcare systems, and rolling back hopes of economic revival in the Americas. US President Donald Trump's desperate push to open the economy has hit a wall with the devastating second wave ripping through the country. Trump has signed executive orders to provide more relief to Americans after failing to reach a deal with Congress.
In the current negotiations, we have repeatedly stated our willingness to immediately sign legislation providing expanded unemployment benefits, protecting Americans from eviction, and providing additional relief payments to families. Democrats have refused these offers.
The situation in Chile, too, is now getting out of hand.
Today, we have arrived at 10,000 deaths. From our hearts, we feel for their families, for those who miss and love those who have gone. And even though they have gone, they will of course be remembered. We regret that this pandemic has caused us to lose so many loved ones.
Germany is witnessing a worrying resurgence in cases as rallies against mandatory mask wearing add to Berlin's problems. Over in Asia, cases in South Korea and China refuse to go away as local clusters continue to pop up. Australia is struggling to keep its economy afloat as the most populous state of Victoria reported its deadliest day despite a stringent lockdown. But there is some good news coming out of New Zealand, where the country has marked 100 days without a domestic transmission of the virus.
Moreover, India has reported a record spike in COVID-19 cases as over 65,000 tested positive for the virus overnight. The country's caseload has doubled over the past 3 weeks, taking the toll to over 2.1 million infections. The Health Ministry says 861 more people have lost their lives to the virus, increasing the tally to over 43,000. Meanwhile, in Andhra Pradesh, 11 patients have been burned to death after a fire engulfed a makeshift coronavirus treatment center at a hotel. Officials said around 40 people were present in the center, of which 20 have been rescued. Making matters worse, tens of thousands of female health workers have gone on strike to demand better pay and protection. Opposition Congress leader Rahul Gandhi says female workers have been facing attacks and harassment. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, the COVID-19 death rate has dropped below a two-digit figure as 8 died in the last 24 hours. The Health Ministry says 634 cases were reported overnight as the tally crossed 284,000. The ministry said over 260,000 people have recovered from the virus so far. It said there are over 17,000 active cases in the country, among which 791 remain critical. Sindh remains the worst hit province with over 123,000 infections, while Punjab has reported more than 94,000 cases. Sri Lanka People's Front leader Mahinda Rajapaksa has taken his oath as the Premier of the 9th Parliament. Rajapaksa's party, the Sri Lanka People's Front, won 145 seats in the 225-member Parliament in the election last Wednesday. The main opposition party, the SJB, got 54 seats. This is the fourth time Mahinda Rajapaksa has secured the prime ministerial portfolio. France's President Emmanuel Macron says Lebanon's future is at stake and called for quick action to help the people of the country. He was addressing an online donors conference 5 days after the massive explosion in Beirut that killed 158 people and injured 5,000 on Tuesday. Macron said the international response should be coordinated by the United Nations in Lebanon. Officials estimate the blast at the port's warehouse caused up to $15 billion in damage. But foreign governments are wary about writing blank checks to a government perceived by its own people to be corrupt. Lebanon's Information Minister Manal Adil Samad has announced her resignation, citing the failure of the government to carry out reforms. The six-member Gulf Cooperation Council has asked the United Nations to extend an international arms embargo on Iran. In a statement, the GCC Secretary General said that Iran's constant interference in neighboring countries made an extension to the embargo necessary. Naif Falah Mubarak al-Hajraf said it is inappropriate to lift restrictions until Iran gives up its destabilizing activities in the region. The arms embargo on Iran is going to end on the 18th of October under the Tehran's 2015 nuclear deal with the world powers. In Libya, flights have resumed at the Mitiga airport in Tripoli after a 4-month hiatus as part of the country's efforts to stem the spread of the coronavirus. The airport director said a flight operated by the government-owned Libyan Airlines was the first to take off from the airport to Istanbul. Lutfi al-Tabib said the airport authorities have taken all the necessary preventive measures against COVID-19. In March, the Libyan Presidential Council declared a state of emergency across the country and closed land and air entry points to curb the outbreak. Palestine says it has taken the issue of Israel's field executions against the Palestinians to the International Criminal Court. Secretary General of Palestine Liberation Organization Saib Erekat said Tel Aviv's war crimes have reached unprecedented levels. Erekat said the international community should take notice of the field executions of the Palestinian citizens on a daily basis. This comes after a 23-year-old Palestinian woman, Dalia Samoudi, was murdered inside her home in the West Bank earlier on Friday. Palestine's health ministry said Israeli army shot Samoudi, a mother of 2, during its raid on the northern West Bank city of Jenin. The Israel's army has denied using live fire, but Palestine's foreign ministry says Tel Aviv is directly responsible for Samoudi's murder. Meanwhile, thousands of Israelis continue to rally outside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's residence and demand his immediate resignation. While Netanyahu denies any wrongdoing, anger is mounting over corruption allegations and his handling of the coronavirus crisis. Waving national flags, the demonstrators called on the Prime Minister to resign. Demonstrators projected "Your time is up" in giant letters onto a building at the protest site. Local media said some 5,000 people had gathered with a large contingent of police deployed at the scene. Protesters rejected what they call Netanyahu's extreme right-wing politics, fear-mongering, and politics of division.
For the future. We want a different future, a future that we can live equally together without hate. And I think this is the reason you don't hear just one voice here, so many voices, because we said enough.
Hong Kong's chief executive, Kerry Lam, says she will cancel her U.S. visa over Washington's sanctions. The U.S. imposed sanctions on 11 Hong Kong officials, including Kerry Lam and Hong Kong's liaison director, Lu Honing. In a social media post, Lam said she does not want to visit the U.S. despite her visa being valid until 2026. She questioned if Washington violated the human rights of Chinese officials by revealing their personal information on the internet. Earlier, some personal data of some Chinese officials was leaked onto the internet, including passport numbers, addresses, and ID card numbers. In the U.S., police have arrested 24 protesters in Portland during the Black Lives Matter demonstrations. Police say an Oregon state trooper suffered a head injury in the clashes as protesters threw rocks, eggs, and fireworks. The police had declared assembly at the Penumbra Kelly unlawful to clear the protesters who refused to disperse. The clashes come after a week of relative calm in the aftermath of agreement between the state and the federal officials. The protesters have been gathering in Portland against racial injustice and police brutality for 70 days in a row since George Floyd's custodial murder. Russia says the UK is becoming increasingly reliant on US policy despite leaving the European Union to regain its independence. In an interview, Russian ambassador to the UK, Andrei Kalin, said Washington dictates elements of London's policymaking. Kalin said London is forced to submit to some of Washington's whims to negotiate a better trade deal with the US. He said before the Brexit, the UK was guided by the European Union's policy principles. The Russian envoy said it was up to London to make a stay with or without the EU. He said Brexit presents an opportunity to boost Russia-UK economic ties, but there are some pre-existing political barriers. Belarusians are voting to elect a new president today amid growing dissent and protests against the reigning government. President Alexander Lukashenko is facing off against a former teacher, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. Lukashenko has been in power for 26 years and is seeking a sixth term in the office. Mass demonstrations headed by Tikhanovskaya against the government have intensified in recent weeks. Authorities have arrested a key opposition leader ahead of the polls on allegations of inciting protests. Human rights groups say more than 1,300 people have been arrested and jailed in a government crackdown during the campaign. It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In Pakistan, the death toll in rain-related incidents has risen to 23. Health officials say 8 more people lost their lives in the port city of Karachi, including the local count to 17. The Pakistan Meteorological Department said up to 46 millimeters of rain was recorded in some parts of the city. Karachi experienced intermittent showers for a continuous 3 days, causing 400 electric feeders to trip, resulting in electricity outage. Meanwhile, flash flooding in Balochistan province has killed 6 people, including 2 children. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has launched the country's largest tree plantation campaign. He said 3.5 million saplings have been planted in the country in a single day. At a ceremony in capital Islamabad, Khan said Pakistan was among the top 10 countries most affected by climate change. He said the country's wheat production has fallen over the past 2 years due to climate change and unprecedented rainfall. Khan said some areas will become deserts if prompt action is not taken to mitigate climate change effects. The Premier said they are fighting this battle for the coming generations. Bangladesh has registered 10 more fatalities in floods, taking the death toll to 184. The South Asian country is facing one of the worst floods in its history. The Health Ministry says over 33,000 people have now been infected with waterborne diseases. It said of the total deaths, 155 drowned, while 16 died of snake bites and 13 in thunderstorms. The ministry added that around 11,000 people in flood-hit areas are also suffering from diarrhea. Heavy rains in the neighboring Indian state of Assam caused huge inflows into downstream Bangladesh. In India, the death toll from a landslide triggered by heavy rains in the southern Kerala state has risen to 43. The local officials said 15 more bodies were recovered and they are looking for over 30 people who are still missing. Houses in the Idukki district were swept away after torrential rain and flooding hit the area. Rescuers said they are using sniffer dogs to help retrieve many of the bodies. A portion of Metimala Hill caved in, raising the settlement of the plantation workers. The Indian Met Department has issued alerts for heavy rainfall in several districts, including a red alert for Idukki district. The death toll from heavy rain, floods and landslides in South Korea has risen to 30. Center Disaster and Safety Headquarters says the number may rise as 12 people remain missing, while about 6,000 people have been displaced. Officials say about 93 square kilometers of farmland was flooded. More heavy rains are expected in the southern part of the country due to the approaching typhoon Jangmi, the season's 5th tropical storm. The flooding and rain have resulted in blockage of railway tracks, flights cancellation, and 11 slides across the country. South Korea has endured 44 consecutive days of rain in what is the country's longest monsoon season since 2013. The operator of Japanese bulk carrier Mitsui O.S.K. has apologized for a major oil spill of Mauritius in the Indian Ocean. While addressing media in Tokyo, Executive Vice President of Carrier Akio Ono apologized for the environmental trouble the spill has caused. Ono said the shipping company would be doing everything in their power to resolve this issue. The Japanese Foreign Ministry said the country will dispatch a 6-person disaster relief team to help removing the split oil. Earlier, a Japanese ship, the MV Boccaccio, carrying 4,000 tons of ran aground, causing massive oil spill. Earlier this week, Mauritius declared an environmental emergency as its popular beaches, marine life and coral reef risk adulteration. France has also pledged to assist the Mauritian government. A fire at a high-rise apartment block in the Czech Republic has killed 11 people, including 3 children, in the city of Bulletin. Police had detained a suspect after a fire was started deliberately. Firefighters say the fire broke out in an apartment on the 11th floor, killing 6 people. Interior Minister Jan Hamasek said the other 5 died in trying to jump out of the building. Officials say one firefighter has also been seriously injured in fighting the blaze. In the U.S., thousands of motorcycle enthusiasts are descending on Sturgis, South Dakota for a 10-day rally. Roughly 100,000 people are expected, prompting concerns the popular event could touch off a fresh wave of COVID-19 infections. Tattoos, beards and bandanas are ruling the streets of Sturgis as the roadies gather to show off. Organizers say they expect the crowd to be smaller than a normal year where nearly 500,000 people attend. South Dakota's Republican Governor Kristi Noem has endorsed the rally after taking a largely hands-off approach towards the pandemic. Daily virus cases have been rising in South Dakota, but the 7-day average is still only about 84, with fewer than 2 deaths per day. In Brazil, a memorial was held on Rio de Janeiro's Copacabana beach for COVID-19 victims after the country's death toll crossed 100,000. More in this report.
Death, disease and despair have gripped Brazil, the land of rainforests and white sandy beaches, since the COVID-19 outbreak. A non-government organization, Rio de Paz, held a memorial at the greatly admired Copacabana beach in the memory of those lost to the disease. It consisted of 100 crosses and release of 1,000 red biodegradable balloons. But despite the devastation caused by the pandemic, most Brazilians believe the virus is a hoax and a government scare tactic.
They were 25 great years living with his deceased son. Losing a child is the worst thing that can happen. And hearing ridicule from people who say this is a lie is worse still, the insensitivity.
The ceremony didn't remain solemn for long and saw people arguing over the coronavirus pandemic in the politically divided South American nation. President Jair Bolsonaro has played down the gravity of the pandemic and fought lockdowns by calling COVID-19 a little flu. But there are also those who believe the government needs to step up its measures to fight the pandemic.
Brazil being in second place in the number of COVID-19 deaths, and this number of 100,000 dead Brazilians is a humiliation. Brazil is naked in front of the world, and these numbers should make society stop and think.
Brazil has registered over 3 million infections so far, next only to the United States, as the coronavirus continues to wreak havoc in the Americas.
Nagasaki is marking the 75th anniversary of the atomic bombing that devastated the city at the end of the World War II. More in this report.
On this day, 1945, the US dropped its Fat Man bomb on the Japanese city, killing at least 74,000 people. The nuclear radiation released by the bombs caused thousands of more people to die from sickness. Terumi Tanaka was a 13-year-old junior high student reading a book at his home when he heard a large sound, then everything went white.
In the burnt ruins, there were shapes that resembled human beings or bodies that had crumbled into bones everywhere. Rescuers had not arrived after 3 days, so those who could not move due to serious injuries or severe burns and had not received help were hunched or lying on the ground.
Today, the city held a scaled-back ceremony with an attendance of about 500, a tenth of the usual gathering. Attending the ceremony, Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said Tokyo will continue to uphold the non-nuclear principles.
While continuing to uphold the 3 non-nuclear principles, Japan will work as a bridge between nations who have different positions. By persistently urging dialogues and actions between countries, we will take initiatives on the international society's commitment to achieve a world without nuclear weapons.
Led the tribute to the survivors of the bombing, referred to as Hibashoka in Japan. The mayor urged the Japanese government to ratify the 2017 nuclear ban treaty as soon as possible.
A Japanese consortium has opened an aquarium in Taiwan, their first outside Japan. This comes even as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to rage across much of the world. More in this report.
From lunch with the penguins to the translucent shimmer of jellyfish and gliding rays, all underwater life is on display at a new aquarium in Taiwan. The aquarium in Taiwan region boasts a collection of 30,000 fish drawn from more than 300 species in 13 exhibition areas.
We plan to open at the end of 2019. As we all know, at the end of 2019, the pandemic broke out. Because of the pandemic, we had talked to multiple sides, including the government and public health authorities, and we decided to postpone the opening.
Visitors are given temperature checks on arrival as part of preventive measures due to COVID-19.
Actually, when we entered, we had masks on and they took our body temperatures, so I'm not that worried.
The complex is expected to draw 1.6 million visitors in the first year and earn annual revenue of about $30 million.
A transparent restaurant in Turkey has taken a unique approach to keep diners safe amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Customers say there is no place like a dome as a restaurant in Istanbul as they enjoy their food along with beautiful scenery. More about food in dome in this report.
Overlooking the Golden Horn on the Bosporus Strait, the restaurant has set up social distancing tents made of polycarbonate. In such an enclosed space, each dome has a special window that can be opened to circulate air. Waiters are prohibited from entering the domes unless the diners press the button installed on their tables. Kevdet Ase, owner of the restaurant, says the concept is highly popular with customers.
Sensitive to isolation and corona-related issues. They really appreciate these, and we're fully booked for many days.
So far, the restaurant only accepts bookings from regular customers to make everyone feel at ease.
We are celebrating our annual year. Here we chose this place because we need social distancing.
We felt that we will be isolated, so that's why like we are eating at home, you know, just me and my husband.
A nice view, side view.
Turkish tourism revenues hit a record $34.5 billion in 2019, jumping 17% compared to 2018. Authorities are determined to maintain COVID-19 measures as the country's daily death toll has remained below 20 since July 16th.
More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Saudi Aramco has reported a loss of 73% in its profits for the second quarter because of the coronavirus pandemic. But Saudi Arabia's state-owned oil giant says it will pay $75 billion dividends to its shareholders despite the losses. Saudi Aramco's net income plunged to $6.57 billion from $24.7 billion during the same period last year. In a statement, Chief Executive of Aramco, Amin Nasser, blamed a reduced demand and lower oil prices for the loss. Last year, Aramco became the most valuable listed company in history when it floated on the Saudi Stock Exchange. Stocks in the Gulf region are trading mixed as investors tread carefully amid countries scaling back reopening of their economies. Dubai's stock market is trading lower, hurt mostly by losses at financial and property shares. Saudi Arabia's benchmark index edged up, with Saudi Aramco gaining despite reporting a fall in second quarter profit. Dubai's main share index lost over 0.5%, driven down by 1.5% drop in Emirates and BD Bank. Blue chip developer Emaar Properties also fell over 1%. In Abu Dhabi, the index gained fractionally, helped by marginal rise in the country's largest lender, First Abu Dhabi Bank. The Qatari index slipped marginally, with Qatar National Bank falling close to 1% and Qatar Insurance Company tumbling nearly 2%. England all-rounder Ben Stokes will miss the remainder of the Test series against Pakistan for family reasons. Stokes has played all 4 tests so far this summer and also captained England in Joe Root's absence. The 29-year-old will fly to New Zealand later this week, where his parents live. The England squad were due to leave Manchester and head to Southampton for the second test against Pakistan. Ben Stokes failed to perform in the first test, scoring only 9 runs in the match. In the National Basketball Association, the Indiana Pacers beat the Lakers by 116 points to 111 as TJ Warren continued his stellar offensive play with 39 points at the Biosecure bubble in the Disney World. LeBron James returned from a sore groin injury to finish with 31 points, 8 rebounds and 7 assists for the Lakers. Meanwhile, Luka Doncic posted his 17th triple-double of the season with a career-high 19 assists as the Dallas Mavericks beat Milwaukee Bucks by 136 points to 132. Earlier, Clippers rallied late to beat the Portland Trail Blazers by 122 points to 117 as Paul George bagged 21 points. Elsewhere, Phoenix continued their unbeaten record since NBA's restart with a 119-112 victory over the Miami Heat as Devin Booker scored a game-high 35 points. Lastly, Nuggets clinched a late 134-132 win over the Utah Jazz in double overtime, Nikola Jokic hitting 30 points and 11 rebounds. Now the weather situation from around the world. And that is all for now. With the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.